Hello, I'm James Woodcock from the Game and Gadget podcast. This is podcast number 23, and today I have with me a regular now to the podcast, Aaron Fothergill. Thank you for joining us again, Aaron.
Hiya.
And also, who's been on previously, but some time ago, who's been very good to join us again, it's Steve Ince.
Hello there.
So, Steve, let's go straight in and dive in with your good self. So, you've been busy. You've been writing again.
Yes, I'm always writing.
Go on, flash your book on screen.
Sorry?
Go on, flash your book on screen.
I'll flash my book on screen.
There we go. Look at that. So it's 201 Things for Better Game Writing by Steve Ince. And
yes.
Steve, for those who don't know you, Steve, give us just a sort of a little bullet point snapshot of your career before we get straight into your book.
Well, I started out at Revolution Software as an artist originally, then moved into a production role, and then moved on to the writing and design side of things. And then after spending 11 years with Revolution Software, I moved freelance and have worked for quite a number of clients over the years. And this one, 201 Things, is my third book on game writing. And it's just basically, sort of, it's not meant as a, kind of academic book. It's just, sort of like based on my experience of, sort of like battling through all the work I've done for various clients, sort of, and hopefully some people can learn from what has gone before, as it were.
So it was quite ambitious, I think, because if this was a YouTube video, Steve, these are the 10 top tips. And books, I've seen maybe like 100. You've gone in for not just 200, you've gone on for 201. So first, do you have a lot of time on your hands to do 201? Where did that number come from? Where did that sort of come up as an idea for do 201 epic ideas?
There is a bit of kind of overlap in a few, not really overlap, but there are themes. Sort of the book itself is broken down into sections, so sort of like a number of the pieces, the things, if you like, will cover sort of like things like voice acting and sort of how to get the best out of that, things like this. Sort of, and whilst that's not directly sort of going to improve the voice, the writing itself, it's obviously connected to the writing because you want the best out of it when so you get into the studio. So sort of it's broken down into a number of areas, but it was a pretty hard thing to write. Sort of the idea seemed, sort of like lots of short pieces about each one of these different things, and it just it just took ages because
idea for your next book then. 201 Things about writing a book on writing.
Yes, don't write a book on 201 things. But sort of when you're writing any other type of book, you kind of get into a flow with it. But breaking it up like this interrupted that flow in many respects. So it's been on the go for about 3 years, on and off, in between other things. So a very different task to what I thought it would be.
So it wasn't 201 weeks, at least. You didn't quite hit that target.
That's the programmer phrase, isn't it? We do these things not because they are hard, not because they are easy, but because we thought they were going to be easy.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah. Definitely, yes.
So certainly a labour of love. You must be very glad you can actually hold a physical copy in your hand now.
Yes. I mean, it's always good to share your experience, I think. Sort of, I mean, I've given a lot of talks and workshops and stuff like this over the years, different parts of the UK and the world, sort of. But, sort of, sometimes I think that there is a danger that we can lose this knowledge. It's like Tony's book. Tony Warrener. His book is a real kind of like history of not only revolution, but it's a personal history for him, and relates very much to the growth of the games industry. And I think that's such a valuable thing, and we've got to remember that a lot of knowledge and experience exists within the industry, it's important, I think, to pass that on when we can. And certainly, that's what I aim to do. And I also I aim to keep the books reasonably low priced, because you see some of these books that I saw one, and they were charging like £100 for the hardback version, and you think, is a book really worth that? Yeah. And I don't know who's profiting the most from that, whether it's the publisher or the writer, but I don't know. It just seems an awful lot of money.
That seems to be a thing with you're saying it's not an academic book, which is good. Basically, it's nice that with any book, that literally anybody who's got a vague interest can pick up something and just glean some extra knowledge. This is the whole thing. I do like finding out things that I'm not necessarily, that's my specialist subject or anything I know anything about, but finding out something about something is always good. You see, I think that the super priced books tend to be where you get the actual academic books, where someone is touting a whole load of qualifications, and normally it's like, this book has to be bought because you need it for particular coursework. So then they can charge a lot more because they know people have to buy it, And,
and that's a shame, isn't it? Sort of when people are trying to effectively exploit a captive audience, and I think,
well, it's the best way to make a profit.
yeah. I don't know. I guess I think differently. I mean, I'd rather get my book into the hands of more people and make a small profit on each one than sort of make a bigger profit from a smaller number of people.
Yeah.
Particularly in these times when sort of like education costs so much. Sort of, and I think that just keeping things as simple and I mean, I'm making a profit, but it's not going to make never going to be rich from these books.
Yeah, I mean, that's back to the thing of, I don't think artists of any sort should have to pay to do their art. They should make enough money to at least live on doing their art. No one should be suffering for it, because there's no point. But yeah, we're not in it to make millions. We'd like to if it happened, but not at other people's cost. Yeah.
I think sometimes there are people in the games industry whose aim is to make money first and foremost, and I think that's always a shame. Whereas sort of, you get people who create games because they love creating games, and sometimes they're extremely successful. But it's the love of creating the game that's come first, and the success is just because they've happened to create a great game. And I think you can always tell which way around those things are. You can always tell which are the great games because
I think it's nice to be able to balance that of work. Like I'm particularly bad at knowing exactly what to do to be the most vicious way to make money, which means I don't usually. I've got a long history of great games that have never actually made me any money or cost me money. But then again, when I've worked with people who actually know what they're doing as far as the money side's concerned, and they are very much interested in making a profit, I get to do the fun thing. I get to do the game that's fun for me and will be fun for other people, but also with the balance. This is always the thing. It's always the balance thing. It makes money, so everyone's happy. We all get paid and can actually go on and do the next thing. The difficulty is when it gets into the insane levels where it's purely about making money and the game starts suffering and it becomes more about a big spreadsheet full of numbers to try and make as much as possible of people without worrying too much about whether there's a game in there. And it does suffer then. Yeah.
So when it comes to game writing, how does it kind of differ from writing a book or writing a short story? I mean, what's the art of a game writer? What as if you were trying to promote your story to a publisher or developer, how would be the best way to format and present that?
I have no idea. Honestly, I have never presented a story idea to a developer or a publisher. Mostly, developers come to me, or sort of like they may advertise that they're looking for a writer, and I respond, and so they have maybe a game idea, and they want a writer to help with the story side of that idea. So you might have somebody who's doing some sort of fantasy, sort of like dungeon crawl or something like this. They don't know how to sort of like maybe stick a story on top of it or to go along with it, or however they. And so they come to me, and that's where most of my work comes from. I mean, occasionally.
So how did you get your foot in the door in the first place then? Because you must have got to a point where you were recognisable and known for that. Where was the starting point to that?
Well, I think, I mean, without doubt, I have Revolution software to thank for that. I mean, getting to work on well, the first game I worked on was Beneath Steel Sky, but I was just doing some sprite animations and some a few background paintings. So it was, I mean, when I worked on the first two Broken Sword games, I was producer. But what that did was that put me into contact with all the different aspects of game development, in the sense of, talking to the programmers and the artists and the animators and, kind of the writers and so on. And then, so by the time we got to doing In Cold Blood, sort of I started working on the writing and the design side of things. And it just happened because of the environment that was at Revolution, sort of, and I was very fortunate. So by the time I went freelance, sort of I had enough of a reputation to get myself some work, but also the fact that there weren't that many game writers around, not freelance game writers. I mean, in the UK, there were about half a dozen of us who had really kind of set ourselves up as such. And the last ECTS down in London, we all met up, and that was about 2004, maybe 2005. And now, sort of there are huge numbers of game writers, but sort of a lot more games studios and developers recognize the need for good narrative and good dialogue and so on. So although there are more of us, I think there's a lot more work to keep us sustained. So actually approaching developers or publishers with ideas isn't the kind of thing. It's not like, you've written a film script and you send it out to producers, or you might send it out to production companies and stuff like this to see if you can get it made. It practically never happens like that in the games industry.
So what's the kind of information you receive then here's the pitch that they're giving you, as in, this is the basic gist of the game, write me a story. What's like the most bare bones requirements you've ever been given, where you're thinking, what am I supposed to make out of this? Or has it always been quite detailed and it's not been a problem?
Well, it does vary an awful lot. I mean, if you go back to So Blonde, I mean, sort of like I worked on So Blonde a couple of years after I left Revolution. And, kind of, they didn't really have a story at all. They had some ideas. They had some character sketches, and they had a couple of background locations drawn up. And they wanted basically a 17-year-old American girl who, sort of like is very self-absorbed and does nothing without a phone and a credit cards and stuff like this, suddenly to be stranded on this desert island and have to sort of like, learn to cope. And that was basically it. So I had to write the story and sort of like, create some sort of story arc for her, so that sort of, although she started very, sort of very useless and very annoying and stuff like this, we couldn't keep her that way throughout the whole game, or else players would get bored. So we had to develop the arc of her learning to fend for herself, basically. But then, sort of like sometimes, I mean, I recently got presented with a story that was fairly complete. And it was a game that had been, sort of in development for a while. And so they had these story documents. And the first thing they asked was to go through the story document and give some sort of analysis of where it, where it basically was and where its strengths and weaknesses and stuff like this. And then based on that, I got the gig for, going a bit further. So it's sort of, that's in progress at the moment. But, obviously I can't go into details, but basically there was a fairly substantial story document. But, it obviously needed a lot of work. And hopefully, sort of between us, we can bring that into something special. So,
and do you think the quality of game writing has changed at all over the years? Has it got any better or any worse in general? Have the expectations changed in any way? Or is that the question? Is that tip number 202?
Yeah. Where are we? 202. Oh, let's see. Yeah. I didn't count wrong. Excuse me. Yeah, definitely. Writing has definitely got better. I mean, that's not to say you don't find games with poor writing, but then sort of you find lots of things with poor writing. Sort of. Oh, what was I watching? I was watching the first 2 episodes of Willow. I don't know if you've watched that.
No, not yet.
I've seen the trailer, unfortunately, but not the full thing yet.
And I thought it was rather charming and had lots going for it. But the dialogue, I thought, was quite, I don't know, weak, shall we say, at best.
But some of that goes back to your thing about working with voice actors part of the book. It's not just what you write, it's what you write for particular actors, voice actors, and how they interpret it and how you work with them to interpret it the way you mean it and stuff. So it could well be it was particularly brilliantly written dialogue, but the actors just mangled it, or the other way around, it was terrible dialogue. The actors are like, I can't do anything with this.
Well, yes,
sounds a bit like the Lord of the Rings TV series, where the backdrops and environments on that are absolutely stunning. You can see where the money's gone, and the costumes look great. And then they start talking, and you're thinking, okay, I'm 5 episodes in yet. What's happened? I'm still waiting for something to happen. And I'm thinking, this isn't right. That's not how it should be.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's Lord of the Rings generally, but yeah. So I have a thing about Lord of the Rings. It's basically The Hobbit remixed as a 12-inch. The Lord of the Rings could have been a lot shorter and a lot better. It just from the book onwards,
Oh dear, you'll not be watching the extended versions.
I mean, the whole second book and film is basically hobbits whinging their way across Mordor, while everyone else dies to distract someone. It's like it's pointless.
Yeah, and then the whole Tom Bombadil thing was, I don't know, just seemed pointless to me.
So hopefully Willow improves in episode 3.
Yeah.
And the Lord of the Rings TV series improves in season 2. But we'll have to wait
a lot of series are doing that, though. Some of them are really, like, you just don't get it for about 3 or 4 episodes, and then suddenly they work out what they're doing, and it gels, and it all kind of goes great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I can't wait till
you get
season 4.
then you get ones like Game of Thrones where it gets to season 7 and it's like, oh, we've got to do this in a hurry, and it all just goes completely to pieces.
I made the big mistake of watching episode 1 of Game of Thrones, and I thought, oh, my mum might enjoy this. Little did I know that the first episode there was incest, and I thought, okay, not one of James's best ideas. So yeah, I didn't watch any further episodes with my mother. I think I'd lost after that part of the plot device. But one of the things I've been trying lately, talking a blast of the past, is the original Xbox Live, which was killed by Microsoft in 2010. There's still a number of games that, even with backwards compatibility rather, have not made it to the Xbox 360 or the Xbox One. Even though there's a great number of games, there's certain titles that haven't. One of those titles, which I played to absolute death when it was out on the original Xbox, and purely for the online, the single player was pretty average, but online it was like something else. And that was Midtown Madness 3. And it was basically an open world where you had your car, you played tag. There was hunter mode where you get police cars chasing you down. You could have it in a much smaller zone where you'd be chasing each other, or just exploring and making up your own games as you went. And when there was a very limited number of games available online for the platform, so many people were playing that one single game. And still, I have a lot of friends now who are from those days of Xbox Live. And that's always been something I've taken great pleasure in. It was you met a lot of people with similar interests. But then they killed it in 2010, understandably, because they wanted to push Xbox 360 further and later Xbox One to have more capabilities. And the original Xbox was holding it back. But that left us with the gap that there were certain games we still couldn't play online. So there've been some ways of doing, I think it's like they called it tunneling software or something like that, where you plug it into your PC but that's more for System Link. So any games that support System Link, where you connect your consoles together, then that would provide that bridge and you could play those technically online with other people, rather than it being someone next to you. But that didn't fill the gap for the Xbox Live elements. Well, Insignia, a third-party free tool, has basically filled that gap. And I was lucky enough to get an invitation after I signed up. You do need to have a modded Xbox, but you can do that so easily. I mean, I did that easily probably 10 years ago. It's just, I think it was a saved game hack I did with Splinter Cell, which opened it up with a soft mod. And then I could put whatever I wanted on the console pretty much. And back in the day, I used BMC, Xbox Media Center, which turned into Kodi later on, Kodi. But with your now modded Xbox, you can connect to this Insignia service and play a lot of Xbox Live enabled online games. And the list is growing all the time. They're adding additional compatibility. But I was playing Midtown Madness 3 and I was so happy to find a few people on there. And I was a bit worried with this being a sort of third-party service and unpaid for, that there's going to be lag, cars are going to be jumping around the screen randomly, because I remember seeing that in the day back when the Xbox first came out, that not everybody had broadband, even though they were supposed to. They found cheating ways of getting their dial-up modem to connect to the Xbox, so that was always fun. But there were people playing, and it was just insane to get a blast from the past, given it's been 12 years since that service was last online. So all credit to Insignia. Definitely have a look at insignia.live. I've had a lot of fun with it. And as I say, the games are increasing in number virtually on a weekly basis. They've just added a number of racing games. But just the nostalgia factor alone, seeing the original Xbox dashboard and the weird sound effects in the background, and all the I don't know why the Xbox had that. I guess it was supposed to sound like computeristic, and there's stuff going on in the background. But even going through the Xbox Live interface on the dashboard and seeing how many friends you've got online, and it was just insane nostalgia because it's been so long since I've seen that screen. So I've had a blast, and I can't wait for them to add to it. And I just love how the community have spent years to get this in place for no financial remuneration. It's just been the fact of, we'd like to do this. Let's see if we can do it. And they have done. And I guess the only thing that's going to hold them back a little bit is Xbox Live originally would have provided downloadable content, which I'm sure legally they're never going to be able to do that. And also, if there's a patch for a game, that would often be delivered through Xbox Live. I know there's a few problems at the minute where people have got different versions of the game. So one person may have a patched version on their console, another one may have an unpatched version. So there's a mismatch and they can't play together yet. So there's still some things that need to be figured out. But the fact they've even got this far is somewhat of a minor miracle. So all credit to them.
It's also, if Microsoft Legal decide it's a bit of an issue and decide to stomp on it.
I think as it's Microsoft, they've got probably the best chance, because if it was Nintendo or Sony, I think they'd have very next to no chance. But Microsoft seem to be a little bit more nurturing of this kind of stuff. So I think they're going to be all right as long as they don't cross a certain line. And I'm hoping behind the scenes they've probably already had conversations with Microsoft to discuss what those lines might be and how they can kind of coexist. But certainly from the top...
I know for Live, Microsoft's very protective about the security of the service itself. I remember when we were developing 360 stuff, it was there was quite a big deal about how it wasn't just a standard network thing with ordinary. So it was basically going back to proper, very serious server centers and everything with security to avoid the system being corrupted, basically.
Yeah. Well, I suppose the good news is this isn't tapping into that original service at all. They've just reverse engineered it, so hopefully it's not going to cross into any of that problems.
Should be good, yeah.
So if anyone from the Insignia team's watching this, we'd love to get you on the Game and Gadget podcast and discuss this major achievement, because it's no small feat at all. No small feat at all.
No, that's hard. To reverse engineer something like that is a bit of a challenge, to put it mildly. Yeah.
And in other sort of retro news, one thing I came across was also there's been the Atari 50 collection, where you can play a lot of games from Atari's vast 50-year history, of course. And on it was a system we know and smile about, the Atari Jaguar, which was a console that didn't quite take off, to say the least. It gave it a bit of a shot. There were some good titles on it, but, it was a rather crowded room at the time of different console devices available when everyone and their mother thought they could release a console. So we'll skip past the CD32 quickly. And the Atari Jaguar had its own from scratch emulo written, I believe, for that collection. So the games that were from the Jaguar on that collection were on a brand new emulator. And amazingly, again, in one of those minor miracle moments, which White House, who developed the emulator, has been able to release it to the public separately as its own emulator with 100% compatibility with the original Atari Jaguar library. Now, granted, no jokes about how small the library is, please, gentlemen. But regardless, 100% is still great. The fact they've got it to be able to be public released is great. It's not open source, unfortunately. It's just the emulator itself. But who knows? Maybe one day. But I think, again, that is some great news for retro nostalgia and enthusiasts who want to, maybe have never tried the Jaguar in the first place and now have got the opportunity thanks to this emulator. And, of course, the Atari 50 collection.
See, I still don't count Atari as being 50 years old. Atari was about 25 years old when it died. And the current Atari is just whoever bought the name. It's never been Atari since after they died post-Jaguar. It's just been a bunch of people selling and basically selling the patent and making money off the patents rather than anything else.
This is sadly also true. I think Atari tried it as more of a publishing name for a while.
They went bust. Atari went bust. And another company, the same as with Amiga, Commodore went bust, and another company bought the Amiga name and have been using it ever since to try and make money on different things. And the real Amiga fan stuff going on and actual Amiga stuff is, again, mostly people who aren't anything to do with the people who own the brand Amiga. And likewise, Atari, they're basically just a bunch of suits who happen to own a copyright and some trademarks and rather a lot of patents that they are quite nasty with usually.
So, Sega's almost the same. I mean, thankfully they didn't go bust or bankrupt or anything like that. But after the Dreamcast, which was, it was a beautiful console even at the time, probably very underappreciated. But I think the hype around PlayStation 2 just kind of blew it out of the water a bit. But, Sega's been releasing and publishing titles for all platforms. I mean, I don't know how many versions of Sonic I have to play of the original Sonic one for it to count as I've played Sonic the Hedgehog, but I must have played it on every platform. It feels like no time. And I remember having a very old phone. It must have been it's actually probably a Motorola, actually, a flip phone, and playing a very crude version of Sonic the Hedgehog, which had terrible slowdown, and I don't think it had any sound or music either. But it was Sonic the Hedgehog on my flip phone Motorola. And again, there's about 50,000 collections you can play Sonic the Hedgehog 1 in. They've just released another collection where you can play, but it's built on a new engine. But still, we've played a lot of Sonic the Hedgehog 1.
Yeah.
And I've got the original Sega Mega Drive 2, just to add insult to injury.
Yeah. But Sega have, like you said, kept going. And it's not just making money off their old stuff, even though they've done what they can to try and keep it relevant, apart from the scary Sonic the Hedgehog with teeth film thing. But the film actually turned out to be quite good once they took the teeth out.
Yeah, it was all about the teeth that freaked us out.
The teeth, it was. I remember seeing that trailer. I thought, oh god! But they have actually published and worked on non-old titles. Like, for instance, I played a game called Motorsport Manager, which is a really good motor racing team game. It wasn't allowed to be Formula One, but it was very Formula One-like. You manage your team, and it's a very good management sim. And that was on mobile originally, specifically on the iPhone originally. And the guy did a new versions and brought it out bigger. And then basically Sega bought it and made it bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's now a major title. So they're not just sort of sitting on their laurels and cashing in on trademarks and patents and stuff. However struggling Sega is or isn't, they've gone out and actually tried to push things forwards and just do more things, which is good.
Yeah, but unfortunately for me, it's got me nostalgic rose-tinted glasses on. If I want anything Sega, I mean, they've done a lot of collaboration with a development house called Sumo Digital. And I've had a lot of fun talking to one of the producers for Sumo Digital, and one of the games they produced was Sonic All-Stars Racing, which was, excuse me, a bit of a nostalgia feast because it was not just Sonic, but it was all the characters from different Sega games. And then they produced a sequel, which I think was like the perfect sequel. It's better than even the recent racing games, called Transformed, where you'd race on the sea, you'd race on land, and you'd race in the air, and it would change and transform as you were doing the same circuit. It was really fantastic. Didn't run that well on the Xbox 360 or PS3, I don't think. Didn't quite hit 30 all the time, but it had redone music. The levels were like all the things I would remember playing on the Mega Drive back in the day, like Golden Axe, for example, and then from the Saturn, Panzer Dragoon, and it was just like, this is insane, this is pure, this is fantastic. And they've kind of gone away from that a bit now, and it's more all about the Sonic landscape and world, because I guess there's a certain age group who'll play these racing games where what's Golden Axe, what's Panzer Dragoon, and what's all these other titles that are sort of hinted at. We don't know. But yeah, they've certainly got into the nostalgia stuff. I mean, there was Sega All-Stars Tennis, I think there was, on the Xbox 360 as well. That was quite based on like the Virtua Tennis type style engine. And it was pretty good as well. So yeah, if you can make money out of nostalgia, there's absolutely no way to excuse that, but they can do it properly as well. And I think there's been some titles where they've got it absolutely spot on, but there's so many titles where you think, oh, geez, just leave it, let it die. It was brilliant. The original version was great. Don't do it anymore. Don't do a sequel. Oh, they're going to do a sequel. Don't do a sequel. It's the same with films, though, isn't it? You think the first one was so perfect. Don't do a sequel. And then someone throws millions at the act and they go, yeah, I'll do a sequel now. Now's the right time.
There's, of course, the trailers now for the new Indiana Jones film where Harrison Ford's been digitally de-aged.
Is it for the entire thing or just a section? I think it's just a section, isn't it?
I don't know, but even just a section, it's worrying, It's
Yeah. I'm never fully convinced with that de-aging. They've used it in a few films, haven't they? I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
But
I just saw Disney have just done a promo video of a new de-aging system they've invented, and it's like, whoa, that's scary. It's actually an age control system. It's not even. You literally can take the source image, you train it on a person that you want to mess with their age, and literally you just go a slider and go like that, and then young, old, anywhere in between, live while they're actually acting. It's scary.
Yeah.
All built from an iOS app for $3.99.
Yeah, probably not initially, but give it a year, yeah, and it's
like all this AI art, isn't it? Sort of. I mean, some of that is a bit scary. Sort of. I mean,
well, yeah.
I mean, some of it is a bit weird. I saw one that somebody had created of this semi-nude woman, and for some reason she had this kind of like third leg or something.
Yeah,
and there was one where I don't know. They put a boobs round her belly instead of on her chest, and I was just like, what? How does this happen? But some of it is actually really, really scary, in the fact that I think there will be a lot of artists will be, sort of struggling to make money in the future.
Well, tip number 203, I'm sure it's probably going to be about AI writers. I mean, have you ever tried any of these and seen what it's chucked out, Steve? Just as a sort of curiosity.
I've seen some comical examples that people have posted on Twitter or Facebook, or sort of, and it's like there was one, kind of they showed an AI a lot of kind of adverts for lawyers, sort of legal services, kind of we'll sue the pants off anybody who like kind of thing. And after I'd seen a load of these, they got it to write a script for one. Does your boss remove your lungs without your consent? And it's like, what? Where on earth has this come? And that's where I think we are at the moment with that.
Yeah, it's still learning. I mean, it is a learn. That's the scary thing. It is learning, but mostly from. This is why you get all the weird stuff. Is because it's learning by looking at all the stuff everyone's been posting to Facebook and everything's been posting to the net, and it's scraping from databases that it's not even supposed to use a lot of the time. And the end result is that it's like, for instance, there's a coding one that Microsoft applied to GitHub.
Copilot.
They automatically code for you. Problem is, it's scraped GitHub, of which rather a lot is open source under various licenses that isn't allowed to be used for training AI. So it's been trained, potentially illegally, on stuff that's not even supposed to be used for that purpose, let alone the stuff that it's copying and pasting that isn't without attribution and so on. And the same thing's going on, but we just don't realize it with the art and with the text and so on. I mean, but it does end up with some funny results. A friend of mine posted one today. He's trying a new picture one, and he said it turns out the AI doesn't understand what a two-handed sword is. You're trying to do a Dungeons and Dragons picture of a fighter with a two-handed sword, and there's all these swords with like hands sticking out of them.
Oh, that's brilliant.
But the hours of entertainment it's creating for us, if nothing else.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's going to get better over time for sure. But just trying different things and seeing how it interprets what you enter. I mean, it's like when you talk to these voice assistants, which, sometimes they don't understand the most basic question. You think, what is it doing? And then you ask it something, you think, that's spooky. How did it figure that out?
Or they have priorities. I found that with Siri the other day. I've set up I put my Christmas decorations up, and what I've done is I've set up my Christmas tree lights around the living room and on the Christmas tree and everything, and I put them into a smart alarm.
Of course,
and as you do,
absolutely.
and I've got I basically, if I in the voice of Noddy Holder do It's Christmas to my voice assistant, it will actually switch on all the lights and switch to my Christmas playlist and start that playing and switch off the main lights and stuff. So I end up in a very Christmassy living room. And I wanted to use bar humbug to switch it off, but Siri prioritizes the word bar for finding the nearest bar.
Of course.
About developers.
Oh, that is brilliant.
How much does it know about you, Aaron?
Well, it knows my nearest bar, but I just have to look out my window for my nearest bar. So
right, so that's not much of an interesting bit of information.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope the AI never scrape Elon Musk on Twitter, who's got himself in quite a lot of problems just recently. He's caused quite a mass exodus, and how long this will continue for, who knows. It seems to have been a bit of a quiet week, at least. But there's been one controversy after another, and without going into too much detail, I have indeed made the switch to Mastodon, but there's many other kind of variations out there. There was one called Hive, which is an iOS or Android app only with no web interface, but they've had problems because there's been potential security vulnerabilities, so they've literally had to shut the service down. And I don't know if it's come back up yet, but that's certainly problematic. But they've only got 3 people looking after it at the minute. So no one's been quite anticipating the Twitter explosion that has been the result of Elon Musk getting Twitter. But I'm happy to use Twitter in the sense of I will follow the people who have not yet made it to Mastodon. And unfortunately, a lot of the things I'll read like news outlets, like in Gadget and The Verge, they've not moved their services, or at least keeping a copy of them on Mastodon, as far as I've told. There's lots of bots that are trying to do it, but they seem to stop updating after a while. Maybe they get prevented for whatever reason. So I'll still read Twitter. I'll still interact with the people who are on there. But as far as me posting new content, you're not going to see very much. I'm all on Mastodon, and I'm posting there almost daily with like some of the retro things I'm up to. And that's my new home for that kind of thing. But it's also got me thinking about other platforms and how healthy it is to be on them. And Facebook, I'm trying to limit my usage on there a bit, so I'll have to keep it because I've got the Pixel Refresh Facebook group and things like that. But if it probably wasn't for that, and the fact that there's probably a few friends I'd want to keep in touch with where Facebook is the only way to do it, I'd be like, well, that's another thing I'd be quite happy to pull the plug on. So, Aaron, how do I get you onto Mastodon? That was the lead. It was a long build-up.
Yeah. I've got to try it actually. I'll try and sort some time out this weekend maybe to have a look, because I'm only on Twitter. I'm only basically browsing Twitter now. I'm not really posting any new content on there. I'm more of again, it's what you're following on there. Like, for instance, there's a lot of Formula One teams post on there. So at the moment that's quiet, of course, because it's the end of season.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other developers I follow on there. Lots of random people I've ended up. And a lot of people, I can't even remember why I followed them. It's usually someone else recommending I follow them.
It's that James Woodcock guy. Who the hell is he?
Yeah, it's like, this person's interesting. Follow them. Okay, fair enough. And then you'll just get random posts from them. And every now and again, something interesting can come up. I mean, like one of the ones I follow is the QIs, the TV show. They have an interesting facts thing.
Yeah.
One of which they posted today was apparently 89% of people who've said they were quitting Twitter to Mastodon or other services are still on Twitter. But again, it's like you and me, because I'm not going to be using Twitter for anything serious in future. But then again, I'm not actively using Twitter. And at some point, I'm quite happy to just drop it entirely. And it's the same as with, like, I'm with you on Facebook. I use Facebook, but that's mostly now purely because there's people on there I wouldn't be able to talk to if I wasn't on Facebook. I don't like to actively post anything useful on Facebook. I post the odd silly thing on there for my friends, but that's about it.
Can you remember Friends Reunited?
Oh yeah, that caused me so much trouble.
That was awful from the start, though, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, that disappeared in a blink of an eye when Facebook came along, and then everyone, we can talk to our old school friends. Oh, we can talk to family. Oh, we can post pictures of kittens, and then it all turned into politics.
The important thing is we can talk to old friends and family for free, which was what Friends United didn't let you do. Friends United, the free layer was actually quite basic, and you had to pay to actually really, they actually talk to your old schoolmates. And then everyone had school reunions, and everyone realised why you didn't talk to them since school.
Yeah. Friends Reunited at least gave the excuse.
The thing about Friends Reunited was the fact that it was often difficult to find those friends. Because there were a few people I thought, I won't mind reconnecting with those. And I didn't find anyone. It was quite poor, I thought, generally speaking. And I think
early days of the technology as well. Search technology was really quite new.
Yeah, but as far as Twitter and Facebook and such go, I must admit that I'm using them exactly the same as I did a year ago and what have you. There are a lot of good people posting interesting stuff. It's like everything. If you look for the good stuff, you'll find it. I mean, you got to wade through the crap, but the good stuff is there. And interesting people are still posting. And because I sort of have these books coming out, and I actively look for freelance work, then I feel as though I've got to have a presence on all of them. So I mean, I've joined Mastodon. But at the moment, I don't see myself quitting Twitter.
No,
unless
I don't think
it
you
just
can.
dies.
Yeah, exactly that.
So I have
think it depends on. Sorry,
I have a very different outlook, because I see it as a kind of part of my promotional marketing, and as well as kind of like, oh God, look what government's doing now. I do, kind of retweet a lot of political stuff, which probably puts a lot of people off my books. but it's, I think, there's an awful. Musk is clearly an idiot, and he can't seem to decide, the same thing 2 days running. But sort of. It's just
giving everybody the verified.
Somebody saw him come in and said, "Oh yeah, we can get him to spend 40-odd billion on this when it isn't worth anywhere near that." So I don't know.
No, it's been an insane month or so with the whole Twitter sphere, and I think that's going to be a lot of people's opinion. There's going to be those who can kind of cut them off completely, and all credit to them to being able to do that. But this isn't like a watershed moment where everyone's just going to move to the same place. People are going to disperse, and although Mastodon, at least at the moment, seems to be the favourite, there's plenty of other choices out there. And I guess the challenge is wherever you move, you want that to be the ideal setting. Now, for me, Mastodon kind of fit that because of the Fediverse, which sounds almost like the Federation on it. Just makes me think of Star Trek and Klingons and Romulans. But regardless, because there's no sort of overarching lord to the whole thing, and people can have their own distinct communities that just so happen to connect with each other if they so choose to have it connect, or to federate with each other, as they call it, then it's kind of a little bit more protected. There's no ads, there's no algorithms. Now, algorithms aren't a necessarily bad thing, but it seems to be very tuned on a lot of these social platforms that the things it'll get the most activity from are those ones that make us angry, or the nasty ones, or whatever else. I don't want to see those. I want to see a natural timeline and just go through that as I wish. And on Mastodon, it just lets me do all of that. I'm not being employed by Mastodon in any way. I just like to say I'm just enjoying the platform. And maybe this is almost like those early days of Xbox Live where I met sort of kindred spirits early on because it was a smaller subset of people who were looking for a very targeted sort of interest. So if you hashtag, for me, most of it's retro gaming. So it's hashtag retro gaming. You find a lot of people who think the same as you. And naturally, it's going to feel very more welcoming, more friendly. And a lot of the comments have been fantastic. And I've had some great sharing of knowledge from me to them and them to me. It's been wonderful. And I hope that continues. But yeah, Twitter, I'll just be there hovering in the background. But Mastodon is where I want to be. But I guess also warning to anybody, if you are moving away from Twitter, even mostly or just partially, just make sure the place you're going to isn't just going to be another Twitter. Otherwise, you may as well not move at all.
I think in 10 years' time, you'll be doing a podcast about, how nostalgic all these social media channels were.
MySpace, MSN Messenger, AOL, Yahoo Messenger, ICQ. We could do it right now. You remember Skype?
I still use it.
Oh no, it's still kind of got its place, hasn't it, Skype?
Yeah, somebody the other day said, "Do you want to do Skype or Zoom?" I said, "Oh, Zoom."
Well, we've gone for
given the way the AI stuff is learning, at the moment on text, pictures, music, everything at the moment, and the social networks are going, and how the algorithm is developing to try and drag us into everything. I think in 10 years' time, we'll probably be nostalgic about how nice it was before the robot overlords were running us.
Yeah.
We're not.
The podcasts will be created by sort of AI rendering of the three of us. And I'll be able to look very young in them because.
Yes, well, no. The user literally have a slider. Yeah, the user will be able to decide whether they prefer old Steve or young Steve.
Yes, I was on TikTok. I was looking through the filters, and there was one for a Santa Claus, and it put this white beard on and hat on me, and it was brilliant. It looked really good. I mean, some of the filters I think are awful, but that one looked really good.
And on that note, as we imagine Steve Ince in his full Santa Claus gear, thank you again for listening and watching to another Game and Gadget podcast. And from us all, we'll see you next time.